Good evening. I'm so glad you were able to find the time to be with us this evening. My name is Amy Bach. I'm one of the founders of United Policyholders. We are a nonprofit that has been doing this kind of work, assisting disaster impacted households since 1991. So we've got 31 years in the trenches, and we're very happy to be able to have curated the information and the expertise we're going to bring to you this evening. Sorry. Bear with me, little tech issue here. Today's program is going to be presented both in English and Spanish, and we will explain to you how that's going to work. You can see here on the screen that you should have on your Zoom toolbar that little globe. You click on that, and if you want to listen in English, you hit English. If you want to listen in Spanish, you hit Spanish. Thank you, Karina. If you'd like to follow the slide deck, you can go to that link, and then you'll see the yellow highlight there. You'll click on that, and that's going to bring you to the slide deck that we put together for this program. So as I said, we are a national nonprofit consumer organization. We have specialized expertise in insurance and disaster recovery. We have 31 years of experience giving information, problem solving, and advocacy services related to fair insurance claim practices and disaster recovery. We're funded by donations and grants. We partner with local, state, and federal agencies, faith-based civic and trade associations, and we've been serving Florida residents and coordinating with Florida partners since 1992, since Hurricane Andrew. We actually had an office for a brief period of time down there. That's me. I am a professional insurance consumer advocate and an attorney since the 1980s. I co-founded the organization. I am a deep insurance geek, but a very, very committed advocate for the consumer. I know Florida Commissioner Altmaier quite well. I've had the privilege of working with him because I am part of something called the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and they meet 3 times a year, and I get to be a consumer rep with them and help them make good decisions and formulate good public policy. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the challenges that Florida residents have been experiencing with insurance because of that work. I also am part of something called the Federal Advisory Committee on Insurance to the U.S. Treasury, and that's because insurance matters really do hit Americans in their pocketbooks, and so we are committed to helping solve problems in the marketplace, such as affordability, availability, and again, a lot of the challenges that Florida residents have been experiencing with your marketplace and with the increasingly severe weather events that are associated with climate change. I'm so pleased to be joined today with 2 great friends, 2 policyholders, and 2 our organization. One of the ways we get our work done, we're a small organization. We're based in California, but we do work across the country, is through partners, through volunteers and sponsors. Our volunteers are amazing. Chip Merlin is a Florida native. He's the owner and president of a law firm called the Merlin Law Group, based in Tampa, with offices throughout the state of Florida and throughout the country. Chip is a policyholder attorney who specializes in both commercial and residential insurance claim disputes and bad faith litigation. He's been involved with our organization since almost right after we started. He's a never-ending source of expertise, information, He's got just as much, I think, dedication to advancing the interests of consumers, insurance consumers, as I do. And that's where you can reach Chip. Chip, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's always a pleasure, Amy.
And you'll see later in the slideshow a picture of us giving Chip an award, because he's just been a phenomenal partner for us, and a very level-headed guy. This is his blog. This is one of the ways that a lot of people keep up on insurance matters. It's free. You can visit it any time. It's very much aimed at experts. It's aimed at lawyers and estimators and appraisers and judges and journalists. But, you know, as a regular person, you can understand a lot of the posts. And so pretty much anytime you want to read up on something, whether it's assignment of benefits or public adjusters or the law in Florida, you can go to this blog. It's quite a source. I'm also very pleased to be joined by another great friend to policyholders and to UP, my friend Dave Charles. Dave was an insurance company claim adjuster for 30 years. He is also a Florida resident. He's the president and CEO of Master Claims Consultants. After working on the insurer side for 30 years, he switched to become a public adjuster after seeing injustices after Hurricane Katrina. And he's been a UP volunteer and a flood claim advisor to our organization since 2013. So we have tapped Dave for his expertise helping people recover from floods in Colorado, in New York, New Jersey. So Dave, thank you so much for making time to be with us today.
Happy to be here, Amy.
So I just want to share my necklace here. This is something I sometimes wear for good luck. It says, "I know what it means, New Orleans." And this was given to me by someone who lives near New Orleans and was working on the insurer side as a defense lawyer and defending insurers. And when people brought claims against them, a tree fell on her house during Katrina and basically split it in two. And she looked around and said, well, I don't know if I want to spend the next year telling my neighbors why they're not going to get everything that they think that they're entitled to. Can I volunteer with your organization? She came to us out of the blue and she gave me this. And together we, I think, forged a lot of really good solutions for people after that storm. And, you know, we're big fans of the insurance system when it works. We believe in it. We're not anti-insurance company or anti-insurance. We are very much pro-consumer, and we want your investment that you made in buying insurance to protect your home, whether it's home and flood or just home insurance. We want that investment to pay off for you, and we want your insurance company or companies to behave as they should and follow the law, and help you get through the process. That's what we're about. We're not here to try to get you upset. We're actually here the opposite. We're here to try to calm you down. We run 3 programs. We're here today through the Roadmap to Recovery program, but we are very well aware of a lot of the advocacy needs that Florida residents have in terms of some of the unique challenges that we're going to talk about this evening. This is the library we set up for you on our website. So if you've been impacted by the storm, 24/7, you can go on and you can poke around, and we are updating it every day. And we also have some guest bloggers that are based in Florida that are helping keep us informed as things unfold in the areas that have been hit by this hurricane. So I want to give you a little reality check, because, you know, I can imagine people out there are thinking, you know, what is some chick from San Francisco know, but I'm actually from New York, but about Florida, right? I know enough because of our friends there, because of our partners there, because of our relationship with the Office of Insurance Regulation and Chip and Dave and a lot of other folks that have been checking in with us since the storm hit. We know that there are tremendous logistics and access challenges, even for people to get to their properties, for adjusters to get to the properties. We know that there is a shortage of housing. We know that there's a shortage of adjusters. Insurance companies have that problem. The National Flood Insurance Program has that problem. We know that there's a shortage of local contractors and remediation professionals. We know that it's important for people to prioritize tarping, drying out, mucking out to avoid mold, but we know sometimes that's easier said than done, and we recognize that. We want to remind you that there is a fundamental conflict in the financial goals between you as an insured and your insurance company. They are a business. They're a profit-oriented business. They certainly would like to make you happy if they can, but they are profit-oriented, which means that we see a lot of situations where they're holding on to money that they should be paying to the policyholder. And then, of course, the insured, generally, you don't know anything about insurance. Most people, they just know they have it or they don't have it. They don't really know about the details. And the process, when you've had a large loss, is nothing like what you see on TV. It's not like flow comes, or, you know, that guy Zip with the magic wand is in your living room and suddenly, you know, your all the mess is gone and it looks great, right? It's the claim process, the way that insurers have designed it is complicated. It would be great if it were a lot less complicated, and that's part of United Policyholders' work. But as it stands now, it's pretty complicated. So this is just an orientation this evening. We're gonna drill down a little bit, but then we are hoping that we will be back with you for a series and really drill down. So some of the other things: wind versus water. What was the cause of the damage, right? Was it wind or was it water? Home insurance policies exclude flood damage, so there's going to be finger pointing, where some insurance company adjusters will say it's flood, the flood adjuster may say it's wind, the homeowner gets stuck in between, right? The homeowner just wants to get, you just want to get your place fixed, and you want to be able to go back home. You want to restore your asset. And of course, there's some realities with Florida that are a little bit unusual. You've got your legislature has been involved. They passed a law last year that Chip will explain that that limits your recovery for roof repairs. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. You have the assignment of benefits situation where you may already have been approached by somebody saying, hey, you know, if you don't have cash on hand and you haven't gotten cash from your insurer, you can assign your benefits, and we're going to take the whole thing off of your plate and handle it for you, which of course can sound good when you're super stressed and out of your home and probably not sleeping well and very worried, but is really not something you should do right out of the box, right away. That's our very strong recommendations. Don't assign away any of your rights until you get your sea legs under you. Also, the managed repair process that some insurers are trying to get people to say, okay, we'll give you somebody, they're going to do the work. We've seen a lot of problems with the quality of the work that gets done by those managed repair outfits that have contracts with insurers. So we don't say never ever, but definitely you need to be vigilant that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. There's also a reality check that policyholders have been warned by public officials not to get professional help, which is something that really hurt me a little bit to watch, because I think, you know, what the message we would like to have insurance companies in Florida hear is do the right thing, you know, pay these claims, give the policyholder the benefit of the doubt, you know, get in, get out as quick as you can, give people what you owe them, try to reduce the obstacles. And instead we heard, understandably, there are absolutely scam artists out there. But you know, this message about like never hire professional help is not a good one for consumers, because the process is complicated. And for a lot of people, they do need help. That's just the reality. And then the final reality check is this, we've been hearing about people having somebody knock on their door and it's a roofer with an attorney right there, or a contractor with an attorney right there. And they say, will be your team. And again, nothing wrong with hiring professional help, but not prematurely. That's the message I want to get to you. Val, do you want to talk about the crisis cleanup hotline? My colleague Val Brown, our deputy executive director. Might take her for a minute to get off the Spanish line. Val, can you join us? Okay, I'm thinking.
Yes, sorry about that.
No problem.
There we go. So there we go. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
All right, perfect. So Crisis Cleanup it's a national VOAD partner that's providing cleanup and muck outs for people. So this is how you would contact them to be able to access. There's also a FEMA program with blue tarps that's available to you as well, and they can connect you to that. The thing to be aware of is the hotline is only open through this Friday. So if you need that type of assistance because you have limited insurance or no insurance available for this, please go ahead and contact them as soon as possible.
thank you. Okay, so the order we recommend: self-help and tenacious PH. That's my little joke. That it's to be your own best advocate, and that's a lot of what United Policyholders is about. Our view: you paid for good claim service and coverage. You shouldn't have to pay for it again, even though sometimes you do. And our website is there for you to get what you paid for. Number two, if that doesn't work, you should always notify and seek help from the Division of Financial Services with your home insurance if you're having a problem. And if you're having a problem with a flood policy provided by the National Flood Insurance Program, you want to let them know. You want to use their resources, and I'm going to give you those links in a minute. And then third, if you can't do it on your own and you can't get help from a government source, then you do need to hire professional claim and legal help. But the most important thing is to take your time and to not get pressured in or fast talked into hiring somebody, because once you do, and they stand in your shoes with the insurance company, and you're going to give up some of your benefits. So, those are kind of the general price ranges of the fee. A PA generally is going to charge in the 7 to 10% of what they recover for you. A policyholder attorney is going to charge somewhere in the 15 to 30%. And the really good policyholder attorneys, they're not going to hustle you. They're not going to knock on your door. That's not how they work. So anybody who is any lawyer that comes and says, oh, you're definitely going to get ripped off and you should hire me, you really want to look at them very, very cautiously, and you want to check references. So this is the Florida Division of Financial Services website and the hotline. This is so you have two agencies in Florida that regulate insurers. You've got DFS and you've got OIR. DFS is handling the consumer inquiries, but they have told me that they're pretty overwhelmed. So they would very much appreciate, you doing everything you can before you hit them up. But as I said, we feel it's very important that consumers go on record and let public officials know if they're having problems with their insurance company. A lot of people don't do that, and they need that information. So here's a few to-dos. Do your best to take pictures before debris gets removed or damaged items get removed. Keep a daily journal where you're jotting down who you talked to, what they said, and what their contact information is. Do focus on drying and cleaning out, avoiding further damage, and then getting damage inspected, measured, and estimated by qualified, reputable, independent experts. And I know how much easier that is to say than to do. But that is the goal. And to check the license status of anyone you're thinking about hiring, there's a website, myfloridalicense.com, and a phone number. Do give your home or flood insurer a chance to do the right thing, but don't be a pushover. Understand the lay of the land here. Get a second opinion if a home or flood insurance adjuster says damage isn't covered or makes a lowball offer, and then speak up, which means politely push for fair treatment, advocate for yourself, and be prepared to get help if you're not being treated fairly. And do tell your story. So the Florida Association of Public Insurance Adjusters is one of our partners. They have licensed members, they have rules of ethics, they're a very legit trade association, and they have this website link here, speakpipe.com, Voices of Policyholders, and they're inviting people to share their stories. So that's where you can vent if you need to, but give facts, right? And go on record. And then also know that there really are experienced, licensed, and ethical public adjusters, attorneys, and estimators working the E in recovery. And there are a number of them that support and volunteer with our organization, and you can find them at that link. A couple of don'ts: don't sign away and give up your rights prematurely, assign benefits to or hire a contractor who's offering to negotiate with your insurer or absorb your deductible. And I said prematurely. I'm not saying never do it. I'm just saying don't do it unless you really hit a wall with other channels. Don't hire or assign your benefits to a lawyer or negotiate on your behalf until you've given your insurance company's adjuster a chance to adjust your loss fairly. I'm hearing that adjusters, just trying to get to the barrier islands is hard. So again, I know it's hard to be patient, and it's frustrating, but giving them a chance before you lawyer up is definitely in your financial interest in the long run. And don't let anyone rush you into signing a contract other than for temporary repairs. And don't think that you're powerless or alone. You absolutely are not. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about your rights as an insurance consumer in Florida, so you know what the rules are for how insurers are supposed to be behaving. And you can get some of this guidance on our website, but I'm going to turn to Chip to talk a little bit about these regs and what they mean in real life. So Chip, can you walk us through these rules?
Yeah, these are some of the basic communication rules that are found in the regulations that all insurance companies are supposed to follow. And the first obviously is the insurance company getting out and acknowledging your claim, doing an investigation, and starting the actual adjustment process. So and these are just pretty basic that and that's the first one. So those are the calendar days. They have 90 days to actually complete the investigation of the claim and actually indicate whether or not they're then going to pay or deny it. Okay, so this 90-day rules is pretty important for Florida in it, but that's 90 days from now. It doesn't mean that, and I'm just from a practical standpoint, I always tell policyholders to be asking for partial payments of amounts as soon as you possibly can, and get the partial payments as soon as you possibly can. You should always be asking for that, and most insurance companies are paying way in advance of the 90 days or before the final payment takes place.
Okay, and Chip, I mean, I know it's real in real life, right? These claims are not going to be resolved in 90 days, most of them, right?
Well, it just depends. The more complex and the more money's involved, the less chance there is that they're going to be done in 90 days. Mm-hmm. Some are, if it's not a lot of damage though, Amy, I've heard of some claims already being over and done with, all over. So everybody has a different claim. Right. Typically, the more severe the damage, the more it's going to take time. For somebody who's had a home that's completely destroyed, it has to be completely rebuilt. You're talking about the potential of, 2 to 3 years, just depending on when you get your contractor, when the permitting is going to be allowed. And, you've then got to go have a place where you're going to put your contents and when you replace those. So it can take a long time. The policy itself contemplates that, that it's going to take possibly 2 years when you have ordinance and law issues out there. There's a provision in the policy to ask for extension. So the truth of the matter is, and I hate to tell everybody, there's going to be this long, the more damage you have, the longer this agony is going to go through that you're going to have to deal with. But it's better to know that up front than the wait.
Yeah. And so, okay, then there's all these rules, right? You're a lawyer, so you know, we're not going to go chapter and verse of all the legal principles, but what are the basic obligations?
Well, the basic obligation is of one of good faith and fair dealing. And that's just, so the insurance company is supposed to pay, you know, promptly on amounts that they agree are owed. You should get that. They should have written responses back to you with respect to the results of their investigation. Are they supposed to share with you their insurance policy, the reasons in the insurance policy why they're paying or not paying? It is actually one of my clients that helped get this policyholder Bill of Rights passed, you know, more than 20 years ago. And those are just, you know, basic, you know, policyholder rights that you would think would be common for anybody in business. But the basic one is that the insurance company has to communicate with you. They have to promptly provide responses in writing about the facts and circumstances if they're not going to pay you a claim, you know, about, you know, why not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so they have to pay or deny within 90 days. If they need more days, more time, then they're supposed to
The insurance company is supposed to inform you why they can't get it, you know, finished, and then what you need to do to be able to complete the claim, you know, within that period of time. So it's not that you just, you know, blow you off, and you shouldn't be taking it as being blown off. And I do agree with Amy and her, you know, what she says. You have to stand up for yourself, and the Department of Financial Services has a very easy way to make a complaint about your insurance company or insurance adjuster not responding back to you and not taking care of your claim. You can file that complaint on the internet, and they actually ask for people to do so. The Department of Financial Services has a budsman that will then take a look at the complaint, contact the insurance company, ask why, you know, things haven't been, you know, taken care of. And this is sometimes overlooked, but I think it's very effective. I've heard the Department of Financial Service, people ask, will you please, Chip, let people know that this is there, this is what we can do to help them. They don't necessarily have to immediately go hire an attorney. We can be there to help. And they do a good job at it. So, you know, I do make that recommendation for people that, you know, as you stand up for yourself, you know, take advantage of what your government's offering.
Yep. Okay, so this one here, this kind of jumped, we're just jumping in to the right experts are critical. Let me ask you, and you know, we're going to get a little bit into how to read your policy just a little bit, and then we're going to have Dave talking about flood claims and specifically. But because people are in this situation right now where their home has been damaged, or their business their property has been damaged, you know what, you know, UP we struggle with, you know, can you trust the experts that the insurance company has brought out? And so I guess I would ask you, Chip, you know, a lot of the time insurers will bring experts, they vary. It's like everything else, right? Some of them are good, some of them are not good. But for the property owner, of course, they have a lot invested in their home or their business, right? So you want to make sure that the damage has been really thoroughly and appropriately investigated. So what do you tell people about, you know, when the insurance company brings somebody out, an engineer or a contractor, can you let them do their thing? You know, do you have to put up a fight? Do you have to bring your own person? What do you tell people?
Well, I mean, I tell people you have to be skeptical because this is not your expert. This is the insurance company's expert. And you have to understand that the insurance company has picked them in advance. They're long-term vendors most of the time of the insurance company. They're dependent upon the insurance company payments. It's not to say that everybody's, you know, dishonest, but I'm always very skeptical about reading that. The more damage you have, I believe that it's more important than ever to have your own expert take a look at this, because eventually it's going to be your own engineer or architect that's going to help do the reconstruction, oversee the repair, that's going to be there with you, you know. And you don't want to, what you don't want to do is leave money on the table because they didn't do a full enough or proper enough investigation to let you know about all the damages that were found. I literally gave advice to all the condominiums, especially major buildings, that have suffered long-term buffeting. Every storm's a little bit different. This particular storm slowed down as it hit. And as a result of that, there were some very high winds that lasted for a long period of time. And as a result of that, most buildings, while not being, if you're not looking significantly damaged, but they were under stress for a long period of time. And you do need an engineer or somebody that's qualified to take a look at that is independent, I would suggest, of the insurance company. So, the more damage you have and the more that's going to be spent in the future, I think it more behooves most policyholders to get your own expert. The last thing you would want to do is, if you've missed damages and all of a sudden they start showing up 5 or 6 years later, you can't do anything about it, by
Right.
then. And they might have been caused by the hurricane, unfortunately, and that's the problem. And I hate to make people just distrustful. That's not my intent.
Right.
You've got to be a smart consumer.
Yeah, that's exactly what our theme is, right? Be the squeaky wheel that gets paid. So on our website, we have sample letters to help you communicate with your insurance company. Those are available to you to customize. These are some of the common questions that people have been submitting. Is the damage covered? Will my auto policy cover damage to my car? If I didn't have flood insurance for this event, can I buy it for the future? Whose responsibility is it to investigate damage? That's an easy one. It's your insurance company. But we always say trust but verify, right? Just what we were just talking about. If I didn't have flood insurance, where can I turn for financial help? We're going to have a little more information about that coming up later in the deck. And what can the Office of Insurance Regulation versus the DFS do for me, Division of Financial Services, do for me. And again, we'll have a slide on that. Very, very common problems, big gaps between the amount of the insurer's estimate of what the damage will cost to repair versus real life. A lot of insurers use computer programs versus how real life contractors estimate their projects with sub bids and trade summaries. Sometimes the numbers just are way out of whack. Xactimate, we always say computers don't do repairs and rebuild buildings, contractors do. So Xactimate may look good and fancy, and adjusters are increasingly being trained on how to use it, but it's a program that was developed for the insurance industry. It is not the way real life builders estimate their jobs. So there's often conflicts there. Another common problem is that because of the frequency of hurricanes in fairly recent years throughout the Gulf Coast states, insurers went to the legislature and said, we cannot, Florida has long had a law. I'm going to let you explain this, Chip. I mean, Florida had this code, right? They have a building code that's designed for your protection, for safety, right? We want roofs to have integrity, structural integrity. We want them to be strong. And also for real estate value, if you don't have a patchwork looking roof, if all the tiles match, and then suddenly, after a storm, they don't match, that decreases your property value, right? So what's the deal there with Florida's new 25% rule?
So under the building code that was in existence, there would always be these fights about at what time do you have to replace the entire roof that's been partially damaged as a result of whatever might have damaged it. And sometimes it'll be 8%, 15%, 20% of the roof is damaged, and people would say go ahead and replace it. But in no instance, if it's 25% or more, the roof has to get replaced. And that was just thought to be good common construction practice among the roofing industry. Well, I mean, to be completely transparent, the insurance industry was complaining about the rule because they felt some roofers were abusing that law just to make claims for roofs, and there were so many roofing claims coming in that eventually the legislature had to address it. So they did away and made a special rule that did away with this building code regulations, so that now there's going to be the unfortunate aspect. There's going to be more fights about when do you supposed to replace the roof, just from good common sense construction, and you can't rely upon any 25%. So I've literally heard of some independent adjusters telling me that some of their insurance companies have said that they're going to go all the way up to, unless it's been 75% damage, they're not going to replace any roof. So this is unfortunate,
Very.
and I think, but it doesn't. So we're going to see what's going to happen. My prediction, unfortunately, is going to be more fights. I think there may be some more legal fights, unfortunately, as consumers stand up and want to have their roofs properly repaired. Again, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and you know what obviously your roofer who you're going to hire is going to say that they would rather replace it than go through the cost of the repair. So it's a very difficult situation for everybody, and I would suggest again that getting expert engineer, independent engineer, to help you on this is sometimes what's going to be needed to get this done if you intend to have it that way. But that's the effect of the rules to help insurance companies with respect to an issue of abuse of claims being brought. The unfortunate part is now the consumer is going to be saddled with this
in the middle of
problem.
Right. And there's math, and we're going to look at a roof chart in a minute, which might make your eyes roll back in your head. Okay. Some of the other common problems that we see just across the board with insurance claims with serious losses is excessive depreciation, which I'm going to explain more about in a minute. We also see a lot of people are being told that the damage is below their deductible. And of course, it's unfortunate, but in Florida, most people have two deductibles. They have their regular home insurance deductible, and then they have a wind or hurricane deductible. And so that there's a little bit of math confusion there. We're also hearing a lot of people having trouble reaching a human being at the insurance company. But of course, that's kind of seems like modern life these days, right? It's very hard to reach a human being at any business. But in this case, your insurer does have an obligation. It's not like, shopping at a department store, but with your insurance, they have a special duty to you to be responsive and to communicate with you. So that is not acceptable. And that's where you look for help from the Division of Financial Services. These are just a few of the good questions, particularly when there's water involved. Can I trust an adjuster's scope of loss and approve repairs and estimate? Maybe. We already talked about that a little bit. Is a high watermark definitive of the extent of damage? Dave's going to mention that a little bit in a minute. How do I know if my contents that got wet can be cleaned or saved? That's a big issue always. Where can I get a second opinion? That's where hopefully there'll be local resources that you can access. And we have a lot of them listed later in the deck. And then, of course, should I hire help? And that's a decision that is that you'll be making as you go along. So this is just an orientation, and through our Roadmap to Recovery program, we typically will do a series. So funding permitting, we will be back over the next year on a regular basis, offering these webinars on things, a deeper dive on how to read and understand your policies, wind versus water damage, how to detect, picking apart estimates from repair professionals and adjusters, options for resolving disputes, and then we'll be having hopefully Q&As with expert panels, including some of our friends at state and federal agencies, along with people like Chip and Dave. So lingo that matters, money matters, replacement cost value, which insurance geeks refer to as RCV, that's objective, meaning what you'd have to pay to replace an item today. Depreciation, which is subjective, how much should an item be, how much should its value be reduced to account for its condition and age? And then actual cash value, also subjective, which is the price a willing buyer would have paid a willing seller just before the loss. Sorry about the typos in this slide. that's a very simplified way of explaining these things. But the reason that I mention these three things is because one of the ways that insurers have made the claim process pretty complicated is by applying depreciation, and they will do that both to your stuff, your contents, and to your structure. And there are a lot of fights that go on about it, because if your policy only pays actual cash value, ACV, then that's all you're going to get. So it really matters how that subjective determination gets made of that depreciated value of the asset, or the in the case of a repair estimate, insurers also, as Chip knows very well, try to depreciate some things that we don't think that they should, like labor and some other things. Okay, so these things matter because it really affects how much you collect from your insurer. So Chip, we have this example of a typical Florida deck page. We're not going deep here, but if you can just sort of point out the highlights of what a property owner should look at when they're looking at their deck page to figure out. Now, that's deck page is lingo for declarations page. That's usually the first 3 pages or so of your policy. So Chip, where would you look to figure out how much coverage this person has?
Well, the first thing you'd look at is the section 1 coverages. Those are the property damage coverages, and you're going to see where it says here, like dwelling coverage, and then it's going to have a limit, that is the limit. Now, many insurance policies also have an inflationary amount. So while that says the limit right there, if it's been several months, and especially in this day and age with inflation, that limit can be quite a bit higher at the actual time. So you have to actually call your insurance agent and ask, what's the amount of the inflationary amount that's occurred. But these limits, both for dwelling coverage, that's for your, real property, your personal property limits, your loss of use, which is, extraordinarily important to you. Loss of use is often called additional living expenses, and some policies have a definite dollar amount. Some have an unlimited amount, but they're limited by the number of months that is going to be allowed. Some have no limit whatsoever, depending upon who your insurance company is. So those, obviously those are your most important policy, amounts. And then you have to also know your deductible that's listed there. And because we have a hurricane that happened, and these are going to be Hurricane Ian damages, you're going to have a percentage deductible that's going to be applied. And then you have to read, exactly how those, for the dwelling, it's usually a percentage. Here, I guess it's 2% as I read it. And so you're going to go 2% times whatever the amount of the limit is on your dwelling. And that's the amount that theoretically you're going to be responsible for. Now, if you have significant damage and you're underinsured, and unfortunately, Amy knows that a lot of, United Policyholders done a lot of studies that a significant portion of all buildings are underinsured. It might be that the amount that you have to fix your dwelling for is going to be more, I hate to say this, more than the limit. And it's possible, if that's more, that the actual deductible is going to get absorbed or go away, because you take the total dollar amount, less the deductible, and you pay that amount as how much is owed, or the policy limit. So, the more damage you have is that. I would also like to say, and I wrote a blog today about it, just because there have been so many people that are professionals in the temporary housing industry have been talking about loss of use money. The time frames for most construction, because of the supply chain problems that we're having in construction and the increase of demand, have lengthened the amount of time it takes for properties to get restored or repaired after major catastrophes. And so, while it might take 4 months normally, it's always taking double this time, 8 months for some building. I just throw it as an example. Literally, there was a big warning. So people have to be concerned about conserving these, dollars that you might have, because unfortunately, I think experience is teaching us it's taking longer. Now, if you go to these other, on the right-hand side, you have, go back just really quick. I know
Sure.
we're quick. They talk about all the additional little extra coverages that might be available, like law and ordinance coverage, which is going to be important, and other extensions of coverage that might help you out. And there's a lot of gold in these extensions of coverage that you don't want to, overlook. And this is where you might find in the extra parts, if you have collectibles and things like that, extra amounts of money above and beyond, what the primary portion of the policy would say is covered or not. So it's important. I know nobody does this, but after the loss, please take at least one shot at reading your full insurance policy, and look for all the coverages that might be available. And if you have any problems about understanding it, believe it or not, United Policyholders has a great reference source with very down-to-earth explanations about what all these meant. I also wrote out and gave like the examples of what does loss of use mean, what can you get. Your policy gives this crazy definition. If you go to United Policyholders, they provide you examples of what it means so that it makes it easy for you to understand. I really believe in that library of help that the Roadmap to Recovery and the Recovery Help Library for Hurricane Ian should be a reference source that all policyholders look at, Amy.
Thank you so much, Chip. So these are the things, that may be covered by your home policy, right? We talked about loss of use. We talked about bring your property back up to the current building code, etc. The big one, the restoring your property from for damage from wind-driven rain, fallen trees, rain that got in through a hole or a ripped off shingle, etc. We talked about the Florida specific complications, hurricane and wind deductibles, ACV only coverage on specific items, roof charts, managed repair, third-party claim administrators. Insurers seem to be more and more trying to use these third-party outfits that just bring another set of players into the equation. And of course, Citizens, which is your insurer of last resort there in Florida, and the special rules they have. This here is what we were talking about. This is an endorsement that you might have, hopefully you don't, that allows the insurer to only pay this depreciated amount on your roof, not the actual cost of repairing and replacing the roof, which is very unfortunate. This is a roof payment schedule. So like, depending on the material type of your roof, they reduce what they pay, which again, I mean, to me, you can see that it got approved by the Office of Insurance Regulation, but it's very hard for a homeowner to understand and for an adjuster to interpret, other than to say that it in many cases means that your insurer is not going to pay the full cost of repairing your roof properly. This is another example of very confusing language that you may have in your policy. So what are some of the early reports we're getting? The good news, we're hearing out of the NFIP, we're hearing that they're making a lot of advanced payments. Bad news, we've heard some unfair tarring of the entire public adjusting profession by some public officials. It's very hurtful to the profession, because of course it's like any other profession. There are good ones and not so good ones, and the good ones can be incredibly valuable. We're also hearing about the inadequate supply. We talked about that, door knocking. We talked about some of the engineering firms that do business on a regular basis with insurers and try to keep them happy, and have a history of not always being accurate in the way that they report on damage, and leaving things out and claiming that things are that damage was pre-existing when it really wasn't. And so we're hearing about that. If you don't have flood insurance, here's some of the possible sources of money for you: SBA loans, home equity loans, tax strategies, charitable aid, and FEMA. There's a lot of misunderstanding about FEMA. If you income qualify, you can apply for an individual assistance grant. They are needs-based, income-based. The max is $36,000. The average is about $5,000. But SBA loans are great in that they have a low interest rate, but the max is 250,000. So Dave, you finally get a chance to contribute. We're gonna get through flood insurance. We'll have a few more notes and then we're gonna wrap up. So Congress created the flood program in the 60s after insurers said, we don't want to insure flood anymore. There was a big flooding event, and they said, we're out. So they, the government created the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program. It's under FEMA. It's a very important program, but it has been, it was very controversial after Superstorm Sandy. It was actually after Katrina, did very well. A lot of people who had flood insurance after Katrina got their max, and moved on. But after Sandy, there were a lot of problems with the claims not getting paid fully. And the NFIP has really committed to reforms, and hopefully, judging from the advanced payments, we're on track, somewhat on track. But again, it's very early to see. So it can be confusing for you as a homeowner to know who your insurance company is if you have an NFIP policy. And there are some private policies out there, private flood, not NFIP. Dave, how can a consumer figure out who they should be dealing with on their flood loss if they're with the NFIP?
Well, that's a pretty good question. I think the jury's still out. Chip would probably be better to answer on the overall effect of the private insurers that are writing NFIP now. Most of my experience has been with the NFIP itself. And one of the, that's probably the main place that people are going to be able to buy flood insurance. One of the interesting things that happened in this Florida storm is so many people that didn't have any flood insurance at all. They weren't even in the floodplain. The way that storms are happening now, water is rising up out of the road because the storm drains can't handle 60 inches like they had in Houston, or even 20 inches here. So you got floods in areas that have never been affected before, and they didn't even know that they could flood. So it's causing a lot of conversation in the community now. Who should buy flood insurance? And if I lived anywhere near a body of water, I would absolutely find a way to buy it, I believe.
Yep. So NFIP policies are different. I don't know if you can see the screen, Dave. Can you, or no?
Yes.
Okay. So you want to just go through these the way they're different?
Yeah. Well, one of the differences, they don't have, none of them have additional living expenses. Contents are separate. On your homeowner's policy, you automatically have contents insurance. On a flood policy, you have to choose to buy it. And when you do buy it, it goes back to your earlier explanations of replacement cost versus ACV, actual cash value. You can't get replacement cost on contents with the National Flood Program. There's no coverage for decks, walkways, or pools. Minor coverage for code upgrades, but not a whole lot. And proof of loss is a document that rules National Flood, and you have to submit it within 365 days.
All right, I'm going to ask you another question about that, the proof of loss, in a minute. Who handles NFIP claims?
Independent adjusters or company adjusters. There are three kinds of adjusters. Independent adjusters who could work for any different insurance company. Company adjusters who might be State Farm regulars or Allstate regulars who only work for them. And public adjusters who work for homeowners, business owners, and clients.
Okay. And you can see here, as I mentioned, the NFIP has committed to claim handling improvements. But if you want to get bone up on the background of some of the problems after Superstorm Sandy for flood claimants, you can watch The Business of Disaster on PBS Frontline. So here's the current proof of loss form. So Dave, who fills this out?
This one looks to me like they intend it for the homeowners. I just found this one recently. Chip had made us aware that there was a new form out there. I hadn't seen it, but
Okay.
when I tracked it down, it appears to me that it's allowing a homeowner to fill it out. And it's beyond me how a homeowner could ever calculate the amounts down in the bottom and fill those in. Chip's laughing. He probably just fell off his chair. How could anybody do this at home? It's hard enough for an adjuster to reach these values. And then if they're wrong, they're going to claim fraud or any different
Right.
kinds of malfeasance.
Right.
So I really have no idea how a homeowner could do this. It's going to be hard enough. If you'll notice the amount claimed that doesn't say ACV or RCV, I assume it's ACV, but if that's the case, where was the calculation that took it from RCV minus depreciation to ACV? These are the kind of arguments that you have in claim settlement. And I don't see anywhere where those crucial numbers are expressed.
Yeah. And, you know, we will, we've been in touch with NFIP staff. They've said they will help out with the series. Hopefully we'll be getting them on the Q&A. Chip, you know, do you have to do does the homeowner have to do a proof of loss for a home insurance claim?
Well, eventually they do, but it depends on what the home insurance policy says. So you have two different types of proof of loss for your home. You have one that's a time limit that says 30, 60 days after a loss, you have to submit a proof of loss. And in those situations, you have to submit within those days unless you get an extension to do so. It doesn't mean you're out, though, in the state of Florida. They have to show prejudice by the insurance company. That's unlike the National Flood Insurance Program. When they say you have to have a properly filled out proof of loss, they really do mean it. And if they give you 365 days, you have to do it within the 365 days. In Florida, theoretically, you could do it up for 5 years. But, you know, there's another type of proof of loss, and that is the proof of loss that has to be turned in only when the insurance company asks it. So it'll say words to the effect, at our request, 30 or 60 days after the request, then you submit the proof of loss. And that's the common form today.
Yeah. But for the NFIP, it's been it's actually, it's usually 60 days, right, Dave?
Well, on a big storm, in recent history, they've always extended it. You're right, 60 days, but they always extend it just because they know, whether they admit it, they know that it can't be done.
Yes.
They can't get thousands of people to pull this off. Everybody knows that.
Right. And this is a memo about the proof of loss extension. And you can find that in our library with some of the details there. When you do put that together, you're going to want to have supporting documentation. These are some of the examples of the documentation. And you do have some time, obviously, now to do it. Dave, we've got this where the rubber meets the road. Talk to us about this.
Well, the examples that you've got there are really, it's one thing to agree that something's damaged. It's another thing to agree on what the remedy is for that damage. Those are construction type conflicts, conflicting opinions on whether soft goods can be cleaned or saved. I don't know anybody that thinks that if category 3 or really dirty water has been on soft goods, that they would try to save it. Differences of opinion on air quality and mold impacts. Mold has become a dirty word in insurance because they've all the carriers are putting strict limits on mold. Mold comes from water damage. It's an ensuing factor of being damaged by water in the first place. So these are the kind of arguments that you get into when you're trying to settle these claims.
Yep. We talked again. I'm trying to, give the attendant
for flood insurance
a good feel for this ACV, RCV. It's one of the more confusing things for everybody. But these are items that only get paid on their actual cash value, right? Never their replacement, right?
Yes. Again, talking about the flood insurance policy. Appliances and carpets, even though they are on the building policy, which offers replacement cost, they don't offer replacement cost for that. There's a list of things, and this pretty much is the list that's written into the National Flood Insurance Policy of things that they only pay the depreciated value on. In other words, the actual cash value.
Okay. And that's different from, before we leave that, Chip, let's go back to like the regular home policy. In a lot of situations, depending on the policy language, though, the insurer will pay the ACV. They'll pay the actual cash value, the depreciated value, right? But then when you go and you replace the item and you give them proof that you replace it or you completed the repairs, then they pay you the difference, right? That's how it's supposed to work if you have replacement value coverage. Do you see that happening? Is that, or are you seeing situations where because the person is underinsured, the insurer is just cutting them a check for replacement value, even though it's not the full amount, and they don't make them go through the depreciation hoops?
The vast majority of the insurance companies for personal property items are only going to pay actual cash value until the replacement is done. So it's very, very important for all consumers to keep their receipts and invoices and proof of payment for each of these items. Literally have a place you can put it when you buy something. I mean, what I tell people is, if you've had a major loss, every single expense that you have, you should be keeping track of, because it might be an additional living expense, or it might be for the replacement of some of your contents that you then can get back at replacement cost. And that goes for, real property like carpets, carpet padding, and all these other things. Most of the insurance companies are going to depreciate those and then pay back at a replacement cost when you do the replacement. So you have to keep, and the policy requires you to prove that you've paid for it and that you've got, the invoices so they can see what it is, and they'll pay you then the difference. They'll pay you up to the full replacement cost that they agreed to, but not more than that. If you upgrade or something like that, they're not going to pay you for the upgrade, but they owe you at least that difference.
Right. And a lot of people never come back. They don't collect the full amount they're entitled to, because they either forget, or they don't know, or time goes on and nobody told them, etc. So that's a good point.
Yeah, we call it, in my firm, I call it breakage. And that means, I hate to say it, and please, I tell everybody, don't be lazy, about this. You have to keep the things that's very much worth your while to do so. I know it's a pain in the neck, to keep the list of items. And most people would never even get back income tax returns, refunds, except for the fact the government makes you file an income tax return to get your refund, but it's still a pain in the neck. This is going to be a pain in the neck, but if you keep track of it and you send this stuff to the insurance company, you should be reimbursed as you make these replacements.
Right. Let's talk briefly about code upgrades, increased cost of compliance. First, in the flood context, Dave, do you have to have special ICC coverage in your flood policy, or does it include it?
Well, ICC is basically the increased cost of compliance means one of three things. You can either tear down the building if it's in a flood zone, it's substantial damage, and you're going to have to raise it up to the base flood level, and you can't. You can move it out of that flood zone, or you could raise it. And the $30,000 that they offer is a pittance compared to what the real cost of raising a building is. That was determined many years ago. The stuff that we were looking at on Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, where this was a really big issue, a lot of elevated buildings that had to be raised. It was typical to have a six-figure number to raise a house, a modest house, not a castle. So it's a help, but it's not going to get the job done. And it's only if you fall into this category of substantial damage. I don't know if you have a slide on that, Amy. Do you want me to talk about?
I don't, because we're going to go deeper on flood, hopefully in a subsequent program. But I know we should mention the rule, the 50.
Substantial damage. Yes, it is something that'll be covered. As you get further into the storm, it becomes a bigger issue. If you've had 50% of the cost of your property damaged over a 10-year period, you have to bring it up to code. And in the flood world, that means you have to be above the base flood elevation, even if you were grandfathered in by a pre-firm building, which is also something different.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of special rules around flood. So just, some of the most common problems, the exclusions and limits, and disputes over pre-existing damage. We hear a lot about earth movement exclusion, but again, I think we want to stay kind of general. And people ask, I'm sure people ask you this, Chip, all the time. Can my insurance agent help me? Will they help me with my claim? So what do you tell them there?
I've actually found a lot of insurance agents can be very persuasive with the claims department about calling, and they can be an ombudsman, with that, and they do help out, but they're not going to be able to help out with respect to flood insurance. I'll say that flood insurance is its own creature, and they're going to follow very strict federal guidelines and regulations, which people might have a different interpretation of. So while your agents can be very helpful with respect to homeowners policies on the wind side, they're not going to be able to help with national flood insurance. They might be able to help on excess flood insurance. So you have that written because that's always written on the private marketplace. And if you have private insurance, your agent, can help out and be an ombudsman to complain about the type of service that you might be getting. It's very important to read the private flood insurance, including excess flood insurance, because they have to have at least the same amount of benefits as national flood, but they can have more. And so it's not, it's all of a sudden you're governed and you're going to get more benefits. And that's why you have to read those private insurance policies.
Yep. Okay. Just a few reminders. An insurance policy is a legal contract, and of course it was written by the insurance company. So there are laws on how it gets interpreted. So as Chip said, hardly anyone can stomach reading, but we tell people read it again. A lot of our faithful roadmap graduates have, we tell people make an extra copy so you can write on it, circle it, write in the margins, and get familiar with it, because there, like Chip was saying, there are pockets of coverage in there, and that you don't want to miss. Remember that adjusters are human beings with varying levels of expertise and ethics. We tell people, think of an insurance claim as a business negotiation. That's what it is. And remember that you did pay for the protection and for good claim service. But in this world, with the shortages from COVID and, the workforce, and both in government and in the private sector, and with supply chain, you may not get the service that you really are entitled to, and you may have to push. Here are the recovery centers in the various counties. I'm not going to spend any more time on this other than to tell you that these slides are available for free on our website. And you can go back and look at them there. Here are some of the Hurricane Ian recovery resources that are being provided by the social services sector, charitable groups. There's something called VOAD, the Voluntary Organizations Assisting in Disaster. We're very active in that. Val is part of the national VOAD, and we're also part of the VOAD in our state, California. These are some of the resources that are available to you through our VOAD partners. This is some information on applying for FEMA assistance. We always tell people, get a FEMA number, even if you don't think you're going to apply for an SBA loan and you don't think you qualify for aid. It's still a good idea to get a FEMA number, because your circumstances may change as you go. You may find out you have a lot of uninsured damage, and you are going to want to do an SBA loan. So it's important. They do have deadlines for eligibility, so you should apply. We obviously, like, I'm a lawyer, Chip's a lawyer. We have a lot of lawyers in our family, because insurance law really governs a lot of how things shake out in this context. But you don't have to hire a lawyer and sue to get a dispute resolved necessarily. There are lots of some free ways that we'll be talking more about in the months to come. DFS offers a mediation program. The NFIP has an appeal process. And we'll be talking more about these things in the months to come. This is very, very early in your recovery. And, we show the roadmap as a road, because it is a path. And, those are some of the pictures of some of our events that we do. And we usually, try to stick around for well into the third year in a community that's been hit by a disaster. We're a team player. We work with the partners in long-term recovery, all these groups that you see here, as well as your Office of Insurance Regulation and FEMA and DFS. So if we get funded, which I'm optimistic, hopefully we will be able to offer some of those curriculum units I've got on the right there. And these are some of the, on the left are some of the foundations that that we are hoping will support. One or more of them will support our roadmap to recovery program. So if you have connections with any of them, you can certainly put a good word in for UP if you appreciated what we brought to you today. I want to thank Dave from the bottom of my heart, and Chip. You two have been great, and I know there's so much more expertise you have to share. I want to thank our other Florida expert volunteers, Rick Tutwiler, who's I think a third generation Florida PA, has been sending us reports and photos since the day of the storm. DFS staff, NFIP staff, and all of you for your time and attention. Here's Chip getting our Lifetime Achievement Award. I think that was earlier this year. I think, COVID has made everything so weird with time. It might've been last year. But Chip, as I said, has been part of our family for a very long time. So Chip, and there he is. You can see behind him in his picture on your screen, Pay Up. That's a book that Chip has on getting your insurer to pay up. So here's a little bit more info for you. The 3 links: link to our Ian library, the link to our general claim help library, link to our Florida sponsor directory. We don't have a whole lot of Florida sponsors, but the ones we have are super high quality. And I think in the months to come, we'll be meeting more Florida-based experts. But for now, we're really hoping that everything we bring to you is going to help you be your best advocate and get what you're entitled to. But thanks to you coming on today, there are some really good reputable experts out there, and you just have to know how to find them, and we will always try to help you find them. So with that, please tell your friends, neighbors, family about the program that we did today, and the fact that they can watch it for free anytime they want. As well as access the deck. So with that, I want to thank our interpreter, Karina. I want to thank Carolyn Winter, Val Brown on my team, and my great friends, Chip and Dave, for being with us for today's Roadmap to Recovery workshop. Have a good rest of your evening. Stay safe. We're rooting for you on your road to recovery. Thank you for your time.